Hey, it's Sandra Pike from Royal LePage Atlantic and the Pike Group, and today I am with two handsome chaps from Royal LePage Atlantic. And I guess today we're not sponsored by Boy & Clark, we're actually sponsored by Hugo Boss, and we have an Olympian amongst us. Is that what's going on there with that around your neck?
1985 Peel Halton wrestling champion.
Wow. And look at all the bling he's got in the background too. He's got lots of bling in the background.
You're not just a realtor then?
No.
Now, your daughter wrestles too, doesn't she? Or she did?
No, she was the first Nova Scotian, male or female, in 20 years to medal at the national level in weightlifting.
Weightlifting, okay. That's close,
impressive,
but not close enough. That's amazing. That's awesome. And Mr. Peters, yourself, go ahead.
As you said, Chris Peters, realtor for 11 plus years, currently with Royal LePage Atlantic and loving it. Working primarily out of within and servicing the wonderful people within Halifax and Dartmouth area.
Absolutely. So today I'd like to talk about showings that happen, especially in this challenging market. And I don't know if you guys noticed, not necessarily a rant, but a really good statement from an agent there. I think it was last week or maybe this week. And it was about some of the showings that had happened at his listing. And so I thought, why don't we just talk about showings and get your feedback. So my first question is for Chris. So now, I'm going into showings with my buyers, and I'm seeing that there are cameras, whether they be like the Google Nest, or maybe they're like a baby monitor or whatever. Should that, and I know that they tell us that it's being there or whatever, and sometimes they don't. However, should a seller have the right to listen to audio during a showing with a buyer and their agent? What are your thoughts?
Ultimately, I would be inclined to say that no, they should not. I think that when a seller is inviting, which is what they're doing by putting their home on the market via the MLS, is that they're inviting buyers along with their agent, knowing that there's an agency representation between those folks when they come into their home, that those conversations are private and confidential because they're protected under agency between the buyer and the buyer's agent while they're in there. I've always told my clients to be mindful of what they say in the home to begin with, because whether it's today's new technology where you have Alexa and Google and Siri and all these other listening devices, people still had nanny cams and baby monitors and could be across the street listening to your conversation on the baby monitor. Now they just have the ability to record those conversations and play them back at their own convenience and listen to them later on. And I think that's a little bit of breaking what the faith and trust is when people are going into your home. But I always advise my clients, don't say anything that you wouldn't say in front of the sellers, because if we really do like this home and we do want to put an offer in, you don't want to compromise my ability to negotiate strongly on your behalf when we submit our offer. So those are my thoughts.
No, I'm agreeing with you. And Ian, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree partially with that, with Chris's comments that you shouldn't, I warn my clients not to say anything in the house, pretend that the seller is there, right? But I think the seller has the right to do whatever they want with regards to recording, video, whatever. I mean, if you're not having the proper conversation with your clients and educating them, again, this goes back to our last conversation. You have to educate your clients on what to do and what not to do when they're in the house. And that pertains to everything regarding the transaction. So I tell my clients, pretend when we're going in here, pretend that the client's sitting right on their couch watching TV, and don't say anything. We can discuss this when we're outside the house or when we go back to the office to write up the offer. Right?
That's good. That's certainly great advice. So again, being in the challenging market with such low inventory, sometimes remember we used to book an hour for a showing, or it's gone from an hour down to 30 minutes, down to 20, 15, 5 minutes. You know, Ian, what are your thoughts of, you know, taking your client through a showing that, hey, you have 5 or 10 minutes and then you got to get out? I mean, this is one of the biggest purchases that someone will do in their lifetime. And then if they compete, they can even probably have a home inspection if they want to win. So how are you educating your buyer during that process when time is so limited, or should that even be allowed?
Well, I mean, it's again, it's up to the selling agent and their seller to determine how much time they want. But in my personal opinion, 15-minute showing is not enough time to go through a 2,200 square foot home, for instance, and get a really good feel for that property and make a decision in 15 minutes on something that's going to cost them more than $500,000.
Yeah, no,
So
it's
I think it should be like 30 minutes should be plenty of time to do a proper viewing of a property, and that should be allowed. Now, I think the bigger issue is that agents are trying to, and again, my opinion, that agents are trying to get their days on market down and saying, oh my God, look, I sold this house in 2 days. Not every house has to sell in 2 or 3 days. I mean, my average days on market is 7 days. I do the first day on the market, there's no showings. It's just there for people to see that the property is now listed on the market. And then we book the time when I'm signing the listing documents, so my clients know exactly when their house is going to be shown between those hours and when offers are going to be accepted. And we give half an hour time and we give 5 or 6 days of showings.
Yep.
Going back to your statement there, I sold the house in 2 days. You might have got an offer in 2 days, but
Right.
unless you're firm with that sold sign on the rider or the rider there, your house isn't sold.
Understandable, but people need to public needs to realize that agents' days on market is basically from list date to condition date, not to sold date.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's never been something really that I played on. I never even thought about my days on market. I just think about doing a good job, you know, for any of my clients. You know, what are your thoughts about that, Chris?
I would be inclined to agree with Ian on this one. I think it's important that agents give the selling agent and the seller, I think it's to their benefit that the buyer doesn't feel rushed going through that home. On the rare occasions where I've only had 15 minutes inside the home, we're spending a lot more time being a lot more thorough. Well, all of our outside time, looking at the outside of the property, we'll do that after our window. And I'll try and get there a little bit early prior to my 15-minute window, because if the agent prior to me left early, then we're going to try and get into that property with a little few minutes in advance. I think that it's important that agents are giving that half an hour. And I agree that the number of days on market isn't as important as knowing that buyers had an ample amount of time to properly view the offer or to view the property, so that when they present their offer, you're not going to get something after the fact because something else came up. Let them see everything for what it is. If you're confident about the property, give them that half an hour, let them reasonably see the property. And leave it open for longer, leave it open for a couple more days. If you don't think that this property is so hot that you're going to fill up those days, then leave it open from Wednesday to Monday. So you've got the weekend there. So people who need the weekend time, you've got the weekdays, so people can use that time and there to the evening. Try and be as open, as flexible as possible from a seller perspective, so you can get as many buyers through the home as possible within a reasonable amount of time where they can truly view the property to put their best offer forward.
Yeah, I agree too.
Another point, Sandra, is that I really don't think that it's in the best interest of a seller to only have their property on the market for 48 or 72 hours.
Agreed.
I don't think enough people have gone through the house in order to get top dollar. And there's, I mean, obviously everyone's different, but I think that, you know, you got to give ample time to view the property and to get as many people through as possible. But, you know, some sellers out there don't want 60 people going through their house. So they're like, put it on for 3 days and we'll take the best thing we get, right?
Yeah, But
But
I
I
mean,
think they're leaving
like,
money on the table.
I would have to agree. And if you see that your property is a hot commodity and there are a lot of showings and offers are due Monday, just make them do Tuesday. Like, again, I think that where this is such a big decision and going in for 5 to 15 minutes, you're right. You don't get a chance to really look at the house. And, but now when you're in there, if within that 30-minute time lot, if you showed up late, you just have those 30 minutes because it's not fair to the next person who's coming in that's on time, correct?
Yep. Yeah, and I think it goes back to a comment that Ian said earlier. It's about having those conversations and educating your clients, both buyers and sellers, up front, so that sellers are aware that and it was an interesting stat that our broker Matt gave at the Tuesday meeting, that I think it was 3 years ago, the average for homes that sold, the average number of showings was 5 in the HRM. And today, the average, I think it was January, the average number of showings for a home that sold was closer to 25. So if sellers know that you're going to have a lot more showing activities, and Ian's right, some sellers don't want to have 60, 70 people coming through their home, and that's their motivation. As long as they're aware and educated and informed that you might be, like, your best offer might be that person that comes last. So if you're going to cut that off, know that you might be leaving money on the table, but that's okay if the seller's okay with that and has been informed of that. As long as they're informed and educated, I think you're making the best choices for your buyers and sellers if you've had those conversations up front.
Absolutely. So we all receive these phone calls, I'm quite sure. Sandra, someone pooped in my toilet and didn't flush it, or they left the lights open. The back door certainly has been left open, or, you know, people move stuff, or they tramp in, you know, with, I just don't get why people don't take their boots off in someone else's house. But we've all heard these comments, and we've all been a party to it with our sellers calling us. I mean, we can't control what happens at a showing. So should there be an industry standard with real estate agents, like when you're going into a showing, this, make sure these items are not done, or be sure to check this, because your definition of a showing, Ian, could be different than mine. And even your definition of clean could be different than mine. So how do we get past that, where agents are going in for showings and they're leaving the house as is? Yeah.
I don't think there's a way to do it, especially in this market with showings going, you know, every 15 minutes or every half hour, right? It's hard to determine who the agent was that did that. Now, back to our original topic about video, there you go. You can figure out who it was there, right?
Yeah,
I tell my buying clients, do not wear tied shoes or shoes with laces. Bring slip-ons. I learned that very quickly 13 years ago, that you know, if you're going to look at a bunch of houses, you don't want to be sitting there wasting 5 minutes of your 15 minutes showing, doing up your shoes. So bring slip-ons, and we're taking our shoes off, and we're, you know, respecting the house as if it was our listing or my listing. Right?
But Chris, do you think there's, oh, sorry. Do you think that there should be a checklist? Do you think it should be a checklist? Like, make sure the lights are turned off, the doors are locked. And I mean,
I think some of it is just common professional courtesy, knowing that the doors are locked. I think one way, especially today, where we're trying to avoid touching as many surfaces as possible, leave all the lights on. And just leave everything on, so that, and I think where the challenge is that where your seller may go away for the weekend to allow not to have to come back and forth. But I think it's very difficult to ensure that we all have that, because even if there was a standard, we would still have different interpretations of that. I think there is that level of professional courtesy. Treat this as if it's your own listing. What would you expect? I always advise my buyers, remember, you're buying the house, you're not buying their personal effects. So don't be looking into their drawers, you're looking into the kitchen cupboards and stuff like that you're going to buy and that you're going to acquire. But when we leave that house, we want to leave the house as we found it. So we want to leave it neat, clean, doors locked, windows left closed if they were closed. If it's raining out, then I might call the agent and say, hey, it started to rain out. Do you want us to close the windows because they were left open? Some of it's just professional courtesy and reaching out and asking.
Yeah. So I want to look in the cupboard, the kitchen cupboard, because I want to make sure my plates are will fit into the cupboard. Or
Oh
I
yeah,
wanna
you're
look at
buying the
space.
kitchen cupboards though, but you don't need to look into their dressers and to their armoires because you're not buying that
No,
furniture.
oh, no,
Yeah.
no, no, no.
That's what I'm saying.
That's definitely a no-no.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
I agree. Now, so this weekend I was going on a showing and the agent called me up and said, oh, by the way, there will be my partner, who was another listing agent who was on this, the listing with her, said that she'll be there during your showing with your buyer. So what are your thoughts of having, when a seller is requesting that their agent be available for all showings at the house? Ian, what are your thoughts on that?
Again, I think it's up to the seller. If they want the listing agent there for all showings, then that's their prerogative. I mean, I would just talk to my clients prior to them arriving, just telling them, hey, the agent's going to be there. Don't discuss anything that you don't want the buyers to know or the sellers to know, and we'll discuss the house after the fact. I mean, it's like having a video camera there, right?
Yeah.
And I typically only see that in high-end homes or higher end homes. I don't see that a lot with, for instance, the listings I deal with under the $500,000 mark for the most part. I've never had that request ever.
So I was doing a virtual, and so I found it, I was frustrated because I want to be able to talk freely with my client because they're not there to see things. And I just wanted to be able, like, hey, this is here, like, what are your thoughts? Like, this is what I'm noticing. I wanted to be able to have that dialogue with them during the showing, and I found that I couldn't.
No, I'm just like that's true. But what is I've never been to a showing in 14 years where the listing agent is there when my clients are there. So what is the purpose? Are they following you around? Are they just there and they just wait in the kitchen while you do your showing? Like, what? I don't really get the purpose of why they're there.
I don't know, unless it's a unique home. And if you're giving me a guided tour, or because there's something really, truly fascinating, by all means, because I wouldn't understand it, right? But it's so funny, when you are going to list a home, like I tell my sellers, give me as much information as you can, because chances are I'm not going to be the one who's going to sell your home. It's going to be another agent, and the more information that you can provide to the buyer and their agent, the better opportunity you have for a better sell and a quicker sell.
Yep.
Chris, what do you think of a listing agent being at your showings?
Yeah, I've never run into that where I've ever encountered having a listing agent or the seller insist that agent had to be present during my viewing. I think that we are all licensed professionals. We all have the same level of insurance coverage. We're all bonded. I don't think it's necessary unless there's some real extreme circumstances with regards to that home that needs to have that listing agent present. I've seen times where it's tenant occupied and the tenant might be home, which sometimes works more into the favor of the buyer. But I don't see the advantage. And if the listing agent needs to be there, I'm going to do the exact same thing as I tell my clients normally, treat it as if we're being recorded and everything that we say is going to be transferred back, because as the listing agent, if you're there, that's exactly what you're going to do. Every bit of that conversation that you've overheard us talking about, you're going to relay that onto the buyer, onto your seller, especially if we submitted an offer. So just be mindful of that. And if the seller and the seller's agent come to that, that's their own considerations. I'm not sure what the advantages of to the seller's agent either. That's a whole lot, especially in this market. If you're doing 60 showings, that means you've just tied yourself up as the seller's agent for that entire weekend or 5 days for every single showing. I just don't see the value and purpose of it. As the seller agent, I prefer the buyer and the buyer's agent to come into the home, feel free and unencumbered, that they can talk and that they can review the home at their leisure and comfortably. So again, so I get that best offer from them.
Great, absolutely. So the hot topic of the day, you have Freedom Convoy, etc. So as a seller here in Halifax, should I be privy? To agents if they're vaccinated or not? Should I have to prove, or should I even be allowed to request that agents are vaccinated coming into my home? So I know a hot topic and it was just opinions. But what do you think, Chris?
I think part of it goes back to what Ian said. Sellers have the right to do whatever they want, but it's then the seller can request that. But if I, as the buyer's agent or the buyer, refuse to give that, then that means you're shutting your door on not allowing us to come into your home. And are you willing to restrict the amount of people that will come into your home with regards to that? I think that it is very controversial. I'm not sure what the health would show or what the health professionals would indicate with regards to what is the advantage of that. Is there any significant advantages of knowing that? And at the same time, the buyer and the buyer's agent have their right to not show you that information. If they choose not to share that information, then that means that they may choose to not come to your home and view your property.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think, Ian?
No, I agree with what Chris is saying. It's completely up to the seller. If they want to say that they want proof of vaccination or whatever, finance letter, vaccination, it could be a number of things, right? That's their prerogative. And if they want to limit it to the people that are vaccinated or pre-approved with a letter, then that's up to them. But if you're having that conversation with them up front, you may miss out on a few people that won't even show your house now.
Yeah, I think the only time maybe, I mean, I don't know, like if you had someone who was sick in the home, like, maybe it would come into play at that point in time because of the importance. But, thankfully, it's, I think the realtors here in Halifax have done a phenomenal job of being respectful.
I mean, we've already determined, a lot of agents have already said in their instructions to members that only the deal makers or the decision makers are allowed in the house, right? Yeah. They've said that numerous times. No kids are allowed in the house, and family members or friends coming on the showing. So I don't see there being a whole lot of difference between that and our topic, right?
Yeah, and I think it's also the additional layer that we also do is that we have that COVID information disclaimer that we're asking that you haven't been exposed to it or knowingly are or showing any symptoms. So I think that for the most part, most of our agents are all taking all those precautions. They're ensuring that people that come into their home, like Ian said, is only the decision maker. People are wearing masks when they come into the house. For most part, a lot of the licensees have hand sanitizer right at the front entry of the home. So I think that most of us are taking all those required precautions to limit any exposure or any possible risk.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. I think everybody's done, all of Nova Scotia, I think we've all done a great job. So guys, we'll keep it short today. That was an awesome discussion, and hopefully you'll be around when our next two topics are going to be about closings and deposits for new construction. So I can't wait to get your opinion on those. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thanks, guys.